When I got married, I didn't mention the 3 apartments I inherited from my grandmother. It seemed like the perfect secret to keep until my mother-in-law showed up with a notary just a week later. What happened next changed everything. Would I keep quiet and protect my inheritance, or would family pressure tear everything apart? Stay tuned to find out. When I got married, I didn't mention that I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. Thank God I kept quiet. A week after the wedding, my mother-in-law, Margaret, showed up with a notary. I froze when I heard the persistent doorbell. Grabbing a towel, I quickly dried my hands and rushed to the hallway. Who could be knocking so early? It was already 10:00, but in the first few days of marriage, morning still felt too early. Nathan and I had spent our nights talking, watching movies, and enjoying each other's company. Before I could even open the door, Margaret was already there, impeccably dressed in a sharp pantsuit, her hair perfectly styled, and a serious look on her face. Standing next to her was a short man, shifting nervously in place, holding a leather briefcase. It was obvious he was a notary or some lawyer. "Good morning, Margaret," I said, trying to stay calm despite my rising anxiety. "Come in, Samuel, nice to meet you." My heart raced. What could she want? The thought of the inheritance made me nervous, but I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I didn't want it to change anything, especially not with Nathan. Margaret walked in like she owned the place, checking every corner of the apartment. She had an aura that demanded attention, and I could already feel her disapproving gaze. As I led them into the living room, I could already sense what this visit was about. The air was thick with tension, and I forced a smile. "Please have a seat," I said, though my hands were trembling as I offered tea. Samuel, the notary, seemed too uncomfortable to sit, standing awkwardly in the corner, his briefcase still in his hand. Margaret, on the other hand, made herself at home, scanning the room. "You know, young couples never know how to keep things in order," she said, her voice laced with criticism as her eyes flicked over the books scattered on the coffee table. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to respond, and focused on preparing tea, hoping the moment would pass without incident. I had to stay calm. I didn't want to give anything away. Not yet. "So, where's Nathan?" she asked, her sharp tone cutting through the silence. I lied. "He's at the store. He'll be back in 20 minutes. I wasn't sure what they wanted from me, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. My mind raced as I set the cups down on the table. I hadn't told anyone about the apartments. 3 inherited properties, valuable and tucked away under the radar. I didn't want to risk any complications. "Good," Margaret replied, her tone softening. "Then we can talk about what's important." I sat down, heart thudding in my chest. What was coming next? Margaret set her teacup down, her gaze never leaving me. "Nathan's father and I have been discussing your future. Victoria, now that you're married, it's time we sort out some things." My stomach twisted. "What things?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Inside, I was screaming. "We just want to make sure everything is fair," she said, glancing at Samuel, who finally took a seat but looked uncomfortable, as if he didn't want to be part of whatever was happening. He placed a folder on the table in front of me. I tried to ignore the pounding in my chest. "What exactly are we talking about?" I asked, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on me. "Oh, nothing too alarming," Margaret said, as if she were talking about the weather. "Just a prenuptial agreement. A way to ensure that everything is clear, especially with your background." I tried to stay composed, but the mention of background sent a ripple of discomfort through me. What was she getting at? I smiled thinly, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean by background?" "Just a simple formality. You do understand that any assets you gain during the marriage will be considered joint property," she said, her voice dropping into a more serious tone. "We just want to make sure that if anything were to happen, everything is split evenly." I froze. This wasn't just a prenuptial agreement. It was a fishing expedition. I glanced down at the papers Samuel handed me, my mind racing. I skimmed through the prenuptial agreement, my eyes catching the clause about jointly acquired property. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Nothing about this felt right. One clause in particular caught my attention. If one spouse has assets discovered later, those assets will be considered joint property unless specified as premarital. The implications were clear. If they found out about the apartments, they'd claim them as joint property. I kept my voice calm, but my heart was pounding. So, you're asking me to declare everything I have, just in case something happens. Margaret's gaze hardened, and she leaned forward. It's better to be clear about these things, Victoria. You know how unpredictable life can be. You wouldn't want any surprises down the road. She said it as though she was doing me a favor. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, you have no right to interfere in my life. But instead, I swallowed my anger and smiled. I don't have anything major, just a few savings for the wedding. Margaret raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Just savings? What about property? I forced myself to shake my head. No property. Just a small apartment I lived in with my grandmother. It went to my parents after she passed. Margaret's gaze lingered, as if she could sense I was hiding something. But I kept my composure, not letting her see a hint of fear. The silence that followed her question felt suffocating. I could tell Margaret didn't buy my story, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Well, if that's all, we can move forward with the agreement, she said, her voice cool, but with a hint of satisfaction. Samuel handed me the papers, waiting for my signature. I took them, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me. I wasn't ready to sign anything, not without Nathan's consent. I need to speak with Nathan first, I said, my voice firm, giving the papers back to Samuel. Margaret's face tightened, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. Of course, darling, but I'm sure he'll agree. This is for your peace of mind, after all. I didn't respond, merely nodded and excused myself to the kitchen. My mind was spinning. What did they know? How much did they suspect? I couldn't let them take control of my inheritance. Not without a fight. I was still processing everything when the door clicked open and Nathan stepped in, holding a grocery bag. He looked at me, surprised to see his mother and the notary in our living room. Mom, what's going on? Nathan asked, setting the bag down. I raised my hand slightly, signaling him not to ask. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't ready for this conversation. Not now. Margaret wasted no time launching into her explanation, trying to paint it as though she was doing us a favor. Nathan, darling, I'm just looking out for your future. I thought it was time to sort out some important paperwork. Nathan's face grew tense. We've talked about this, Mom. Why is there a notary here? I watched him, holding my breath. I knew he loved me, but this was different. This was his mother, and I feared the divide it could cause. Margaret turned to Nathan, pushing for him to understand her reasoning. We just want to ensure everything is clear. It's nothing personal, Victoria, but these things are important. I stood still, trying to keep calm, but my chest felt tight. Nathan was confused, his gaze bouncing between his mother and me. Mom, you need to stop pressuring us, he finally said, his voice firm. Victoria and I will handle our own lives. We don't need this kind of interference. Margaret didn't back down. She gave him a look that screamed, you don't understand. But this time, Nathan wasn't backing off. I could feel the tension rising, but for once, it felt like he was truly on my side. That night, after Margaret and the notary left, Nathan and I sat down to talk. The weight of everything hung in the air, but there was something comforting in knowing we were a team. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, I said, my voice quiet but sincere. I didn't want anything to come between us, especially with your mom. I didn't think it would be a good idea to share it too soon. Nathan looked at me, his expression softening. I get it. I don't like her interfering, but I understand why you kept it to yourself. It's just, I don't know why she has to be like this. We talked for hours, trying to work through the pressure of family expectations and the secrets that had built walls between us. In the end, I knew I had to make a decision. whether to keep hiding the truth or finally tell him everything. The next day, I stood by the window, gazing out at the city. My mind raced as I thought about the apartments. 3 places, all valuable, and none of it shared with Nathan. Part of me wanted to be completely open, but another part feared that revealing everything would change how he saw me. Would he look at me differently? Would his family pressure him to ask for the apartments? But it wasn't just the money. It was the fear of Margaret's control over everything. I'd seen the way she pushed, how she manipulated situations to suit her needs. I couldn't let her win. Over the next few weeks, Margaret's visits became more frequent. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then I realized she was probing, trying to uncover more. She asked questions about our finances, subtly nudging to see if there was anything I hadn't revealed. One day, after one of her unannounced visits, Nathan came to me, his face full of concern. "Mom keeps asking about your savings. She's worried we're not making enough money. You're not hiding anything from me, are you?" My stomach dropped. What did she think? Why couldn't she trust us to handle our own lives? It didn't take long for Margaret to start making her moves. One evening, she casually mentioned that Nathan and I should think about our future. "You need to plan for kids, for the house, for everything," she said, her voice too sweet to be casual. I felt the pressure again. She was planting seeds of doubt, trying to get inside my head. Nathan, too, started to notice the tension. "Why is she always on us?" he asked one night, his voice frustrated. "We need space to make our own choices." I nodded, agreeing with him. But deep down, I felt the weight of Margaret's expectations. I wanted to escape the noise, but I didn't know how. A week later, Margaret and her husband stopped by unexpectedly. This time, they came with another person, an architect. Margaret had set up an appointment without consulting us. "We're just looking out for you, Victoria," she said, acting like it was no big deal. I stood frozen, my thoughts racing. This wasn't just about family. This was about control, about taking over what should have been Nathan and my decision to make. But Nathan didn't back down. "Mom, I told you before. We're not making any decisions without discussing it together first." Margaret's face twisted into a frown. "I just want what's best for you," she muttered before they left, but the damage had already been done. As the weeks passed, the pressure from Margaret continued to mount. One day, she called me, demanding that I use my inheritance to help with their business. They needed money to expand, and of course, she thought I should be the one to fund it. Her words stung, and I could feel the anger building inside me. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I said firmly, "but I'm not going to invest in your business. That's not my responsibility." Nathan stood by me, but I could feel the weight of the family dynamic shifting. Margaret didn't like being told no. And I knew she wouldn't stop trying to manipulate us. Nathan and I began to drift apart, not emotionally, but in the way we dealt with his mother. Every time I stood my ground, he seemed to pull away a little more, trying to avoid confrontation. But one evening, after an argument with Margaret, he looked at me with weary eyes. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said softly. "I don't want to lose you, but I can't keep fighting her battles. She's my mom." I looked at him, understanding the conflict. But I also knew that I couldn't keep living under her thumb. "Nathan, I love you," I said, my voice steady. "But I won't let her control our lives." The following months were a whirlwind of adjustments. Nathan and I began to carve out our own space, despite the constant pressure from his family. We moved into one of my apartments, finally free from Margaret's constant prying. It felt like a victory, even though the tension never fully disappeared. Margaret still showed up unannounced. But now we had a place of our own to retreat to. I still kept the inheritance a secret from most of the world, but Nathan and I were united in a way I never thought possible. We were learning to trust each other again. One evening, Margaret called. "I know you've been hiding something from me," she said, her voice thick with suspicion. "I've heard rumors. What's going on with you and Nathan?" My heart raced. This was it. I couldn't keep running from the truth. I took a deep breath. I own 3 apartments. I inherited them from my grandmother. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, she spoke. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I swallowed hard. I didn't want to make things complicated, Margaret. I didn't want it to become about the money. Nathan looked at me, his face a mix of confusion and concern. You never told me about the apartments. He asked, his voice quiet but full of hurt. I nodded. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you, Nathan. I didn't want your family to think I was hiding something. His gaze softened, and he reached for my hand. I understand. But we're a team, Victoria. We should have been honest with each other from the start. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter. With the truth out, Margaret didn't take it well. She called frequently, accusing me of hiding things, of betraying her trust. But Nathan and I stood firm, setting boundaries and refusing to let her dictate our choices. It wasn't easy, but we were learning. We spent more time together, just the 2 of us. Slowly, the tensions from the past began to fade, replaced by a stronger, more united front. Despite everything, we made a pact. We wouldn't let the family drama dictate our lives. Nathan and I set out to make our own decisions, even if it meant going against Margaret's wishes. It was hard at first, but we knew it was necessary. Every day brought new challenges, but we faced them together. Months passed, and the drama slowly started to die down. Margaret still pushed, but we were stronger now. We refused to let her intrude on our lives. One day, she finally accepted that we weren't going to back down. I still don't agree with you, she said, but I respect your decisions. That was the moment I knew we'd made it through. No more notaries, no more manipulation. We were free. With the inheritance situation finally settled, Nathan and I started focusing on the future. We bought land and began plans to build our dream home. For the first time, we felt truly in control of our lives. Margaret tried to give advice, but now it was different. We listened, but the final decision was ours. We had learned to find a balance between respect and boundaries. Over the next few years, life took on a new rhythm. We raised Paul, moved into our new home, and slowly built the life we always wanted. Margaret still showed up now and then, but she no longer had the power to disrupt our peace. We had built our own foundation. Nathan and I had found a way to live without the constant interference of his mother. It wasn't always easy, but we had found strength in each other. As the years passed, we continued to grow closer, our bond unbreakable. The family saga wasn't over, but for now, it was calm. We had our home, our son, and the future ahead of us. Nathan and I knew we'd face more challenges, but we were ready. We'd come this far together. If you've learned anything from this story, remember this: protecting your boundaries is key to protecting your peace. If you're dealing with pressure from family or anyone else, stand firm. Your story is yours to write. And if you're ever in doubt, remember my grandmother's advice sometimes: silence is the greatest weapon. If you found this story inspiring, like and share. Join us for more heartfelt journeys of love, life, and boundaries.